Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another installment of Diamond Gee Speaks. I'm your host, Diamond Gee. Pardon me. And tonight's topic is going to be the beginning of something that I feel is of great importance to every member of every community, in particular the so-called blacks or the so-called black community here in America. And it's basically a wake-up call. There are a lot of so-called whites that actually have tried to touch this topic from time to time, and for some reason, if they say something that doesn't jive with the common mainstream view, they're usually beat down and considered to be bigot or racist because they oppose affirmative action. Let me put this out here real quick, straight up. I don't give a damn if someone thinks that I'm quote unquote anti-black. What I am is anti-American Negro. All right, and any type of program that I feel is basically out there and set in a place to destroy or erode the foundation of any said community, that's a problem for me, and I'm going to speak out of one. And in addition to that, I'm going to make my point for why this is not just a situation where it's a black or so-called black issue. It's also an issue for so-called whites and basically any other ethnicity in this country, because affirmative action erodes away from confidence. It also demeans, belittles, and subjects individuals who are qualified for a particular position to undue and unfair discrimination. So let's just get right into it. Let's start off with that topic itself. So, like I said, I believe that affirmative action, it was doomed to fail from the very beginning. Now, I'm not going to throw a bunch of born statistics at you. Should you decide that you want to get some more information on this, by all means, do some research on it. Look up the statute, look up the other laws that were in place before affirmative action, and then make your own judgment accordingly. What you will more than likely find, if you are a learned person and you can educate yourself and crack open a few books and basically go out through history, study statistics on the percentage of the so-called blacks that have been helped by affirmative action, and you will see that it's actually a system in place that it's basically a mirage of sorts, because in actuality, from a philosophical and ideological standpoint, it is impossible for affirmative action to work. All right, so let's just jump right in. Now, when it comes to affirmative action, the guise in which it was put into place was that it was supposed to level the playing field. Level the playing field specifically for people of color. There was a time in this country where blacks were just flat out, or so-called blacks were just flat out denied equal rights and equal representation. So the powers that be felt again that it would be good to be able to throw a little band-aid up on here and say, hey, you know what, let's come up with a policy where these organizations are not allowed to discriminate. They're told that they have to integrate. They have to integrate. They have to bring X amount of blacks, onto a position where there's, X amount of whites. Now, the worst part about this was that, in principle, like I said before, it seems like a great idea. But the fact is, the affirmative action statutes don't go far enough. Okay? An example would be this. Now, affirmative action statutes do not state, that the person, the so-called black that's supposed to benefit from this position, there is no type of standard that says that you have to take the most qualified so-called black or person of color. All right, and therein lies society's dilemma here. Okay, and it leads to situations where you have self-fulfilling prophecies. Different universities will say, hey, we've practiced affirmative action. We let this so-called black come over here to our school, and we had to lower our standards so that the so-called black could get in here, and then the so-called black couldn't hack it. But what's happened here is that because of affirmative action, it's allowed for that school to actually skip a more qualified person of color. Right? Now we hear that all the time, like, oh, I've been, usually it's here, so-called whites. A lot of times they'll say, I lost my job to, a black person, because of affirmative action, or I lost my place in a school because of a black person. But what they don't understand is that they're not alone in that. You may have an affluent, a person of color who comes from a very well-educated family. Financially, they seem to be, pretty well off, and they may apply at the same time as this other, say, so-called black. Now, the other so-called black that faces this other black, for competition for admission to a particular program, they on the surface, they're simply deemed equal because of their skin color. But in actuality, their education, their upbringing, there's nothing equal about it. That person who has had that better shot out the gate should be given the opportunity, okay, if they've worked hard enough, over another so-called black. But that's not the way the system is set up, okay? So what happens is that these people are allowed, these people, when I refer to these people, we're talking about individuals within academia. They're allowed to actually handpick, the type of quote-unquote black person that they want in their program, okay? And that's a problem, and that's again, that's the hidden, like the hidden effect, if you will, of so-called black warfare, class warfare within the so-called black community. Now, I can speak from this on experience. It's really ironic when I've interviewed for jobs over the phone. Oftentimes I've been mistaken for a Caucasian because apparently some of these employers and even these individuals at these different universities, they do not believe that people of color have basically upper intellectual functions, and that we can't speak the Queen's English. So supposedly, the only thing we're good for is Ebonics. That being said, I'm on the phone. I talk to them like, oh, yep, I like to come to your program. Oh, that's really great. And I check other on my little application, because like I said before, go back and check my other videos. A person of color should never ever check black. You're limiting yourself and you're destroying yourself. And if you believe that that's something that's fruitful, I would offer you this suggestion: check the other box and see what type of response you get. When you don't classify yourself, because in actuality, you are not black. There is no, black isn't even a color. Black is considered a shade. But I digress. Let me get back on topic here. So, I've basically showed up, for I'm not going to name the university that I applied to. I came in, for my interview, and I sit down and I'm talking to the guy, and he's like, oh wow, he's like, oh man, we really love to have you here, but you're qualified, but through affirmative action, we've already selected the black candidate that came in here. You're more qualified than him. I'm like, okay. He's like, yeah, you didn't check. You should have checked black on the box, and you would have been compared against him. Now, I looked at this guy and I said, listen, man. I said I don't want to be a part of your school. Well, why? Well, why is that? We have a great history, it's the Ivy League. I said, listen, man, if my grades, okay, and my merits, if I can't get into your school strictly based on the fact that I've outperformed not only the so-called whites that go here, but also the so-called blacks that you're trying to recruit here, it should not be a discussion about my ethnicity or my race, or what I look like. That should never come into question. And affirmative action, you should never ever bring that up, to me. And the guy's looking at me like, well, most times, you folks usually don't think like that. You see, therein lies the problem. Okay, you're dealing with a set of rules and regulations that are supposed to be prohibiting and supposed to correct those type of anomalies in the system. Okay, but it doesn't. As a matter of fact, affirmative action actually fosters those type of things, you know, and that's problematic. You know, it really is. You know, so let's stick on the whole topic of affirmative action. Let's go a little bit further. Let's move away from the effects in the workplace. You know, even when you look at you know, let's go back to that real quick. You know, another example of where affirmative action hurts minorities would be in a hiring process. Let's say you're going to apply to become a police officer, pardon me, with the New Jersey State Police. All right. Now, you're a highly qualified candidate, you know, but as soon as they find out that you're a person of color, you go to the blacklist, right? Now, where the regular list against everybody else has maybe about, we'll say about 2,000 applicants, right? The blacklist may have, say, 500 applicants, you know. So what happens is that now you're in the blacklist, you know what I'm saying, and you know, you're in that pool, you know. So things have already been separated, right? That's segregation, right? That's what affirmative action is supposed to fix, right? But no, you have a situation where you have your blacklist, and you've got the other list and everybody else. You got a minority list and a so-called white list, right? Okay. Now, automatically, no matter what your qualifications are, or how, you know, or how top of the class you are automatically going to be deemed as inferior. Okay, because the only way the way it looks is the only way that you're going to get in here is if you get in on the so-called blacklist. You know, because otherwise you wouldn't qualify for the position. Okay. Now let's go even further. Let's go into what I believe are let's see, we could go the logic. You know, let's look at the psychological influences and the effects, and then kind of see where it goes from there with what affirmative action has to offer. Okay. Now, with affirmative action, with that being said, you know, the premise now is let's accept what affirmative action has done, right? Let's say that that's the way it has to be. Affirmative action, you know, like people say, you know, standards get lowered. There's segregation starting here, left and right. Okay, that undermines, you know, the very thing that the so-called black has been trying to accomplish here in this country. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Now, when you have affirmative action, there's already an assumption, okay, that those who are trying to, you know, get in under affirmative action are inferior. So what do you think that's going to do for your psyche, okay, as a person of color? All right. Now, you look at it, it's so much deeper than just what you see on the surface. You know, human beings are creatures, you know, who are prideful. You know, we strive to be the best that we possibly can be. And whether people like to admit it or not, how you're perceived in the world has a great effect, not only on you, but on your family as well. You know, so if right out the gate you're perceived as being weaker, okay, you're going to have to go harder, right? You're going to have to do more than what anybody else has done, okay? But when that happens, you put your foot on the gas pedal, and guess what? Instead of you seeing, you know, this exit sign up here on the left and the exit sign up on the right where you might be able to maybe get off and, you know, take a break, you put your foot on the gas and you're going down the highway full tilt, right, with only one goal in mind. Okay, it's like I have to prove everybody wrong. But during that process now, you've shied away from what your collective role is, which is a father, a leader, you know, or for women, a mother, and things outside of that have to suffer. Okay. Now, we're not even talking about, you know, the let's say the emotional toll. You know, let's just stick with what happens with families. Okay, so now let's say a so-called black father, you know, gets on this chase here. Now, instead of him being there for his children, you know, being able to go to baseball games or football games, he's at work. You know, he's working his so-called white counterparts are working, say, 40 hours a week. In order for him to prove himself, he's got to be there 60 hours a week. Okay. And this is just what it is, because he now, when he's got the job, but now he has to prove that he belongs, right? Same thing with medical school, with a medical program, you know. You just can't get around it. You apply to medical school, you know, and you get in it as a person of color, whether you're mixed or whatever the case may be. Once you're in there, it's automatically assumed that you don't belong there. You know, you must have gotten a break. You must have been part of affirmative action, because otherwise there's just no explanation for it. Okay, and that's when we start discussing the topics of institutionalized racism. Okay, and how things are set up, you know, to make sure that you get knocked down. You know, so when you're going and you're looking at it from that kind of standpoint, you have another dimension that you have to add to it. Okay, and that's the American Negro, right? Now, the American Negro, you know, and you know, again, you know, take a look at my previous videos. They really have a slave step-and-fetch-it mentality. All right. So in actuality, they're almost like it's like lighting a fuse at both ends. Okay. Now out front, you know, you're a person of color who's trying to strive and achieve. You're dealing with the perceptions of society because of affirmative action that you are weaker. So you got to go hard there. Now behind you comes the American Negro on this side. Okay. So basically you could say the wick is double long on this side. This side has been shortened, you know, by about a full length. And what happens is that the American Negro was behind you, okay, eating up everything. What's left, what they leave is ashes, you know. So behind you, they're leaving scorched earth while they're trying to attack you for trying to do what you need to do to provide for your family, okay. Now, again, I believe this is directly related to affirmative action, because those individuals who are people of color who want to try to be groundbreakers, you know, they're then considered, oh, you know, you're an uppity quote unquote nigger, you know. You're trying to be like the white man. You're trying to be white, you know, when all you're simply doing is running the same race that these ignoramuses, you know, are running, yet they don't realize it, you know, and they're trying to knock you down while you're going forward. So affirmative action reinforces these type of stereotypes, okay? Because affirmative action in the black community, you know, so-called black community, is just horrible. Because what it says, you know, you got these one group, you got, even you'll say, let's take a batch of American Negroes, right? They look at someone like let's say Condoleezza Rice, right? Now this woman is extremely educated, you know, brilliant. Just brilliant, you know. There's a whole separate ball of wax with that. But you know, they looked at her, the American Negro, you know. They said, "Oh, hey, look, you know, Condoleezza Rice, she's out front there, you know. Well, you know, saying affirmative action. She wouldn't have been where she's at without affirmative action, right?" But when things went bad, you know, and you know, she's you know part of Bush's administration, and then there was this huge thing where, you know, they got this whole thing, and the master of American Negroes, Kanye West, jumps on TV talking about George Bush doesn't like black people with Hurricane Katrina and all that crap. You know, come to find out, in actuality, it was a pack of Negroes, you know, saying, who was stealing, robbing, mobbing, you know, and we're talking about at a governmental level here. And they were stealing and doing so many different things, and it had nothing to do with the Bush administration and their response. You know, these Negroes are stealing money. And matter of fact, just recently, some of them got convicted. You know, so what ends up happening, you know, once the American Negro gets, you know, sour, you know, it's no longer a situation where Condoleezza Rice is a trailblazer, right? Now she becomes a token Negro. You know, she's an Uncle Tom. You know, Aunt Jemima, you know, saying a mammy, etc., 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 right? Because their tone on her is soured, you know. So she's no longer strong. Now she's weak, you know, and she's a subservient token Negro, right? And this is the same woman that the so-called black, you know, and these American Negroes was trumping up before then, you know. And unfortunately, what's happened is that, you know, the American Negro, like I said before, they make up a very small portion of our population, but they make a lot of noise, you know. And those of us who are sensible and level-headed, we're often overlooked, you know. There are so many of us out there, you know, and you can raise your hand because, you know, I'm one of them. I know you're one of them as well, you know, that see this type of stuff. You know, we sit back and we're just shaking our head, you know, like, damn, you know what I'm saying? I just don't understand how the American Negro is allowed to get this stuff off, you know. But anyway, I digress. Let me get back on topic. So now, you know, when it comes to affirmative action, you know, affirmative action's got basically, it helps to reinforce those negative stereotypes. And because, you know, you have the so-called black who is trying to make some progress, but they're constantly being broken down from behind by the American Negro, and then they're facing hostile situations out in front, which is part of life. You know, black, white, green, or purple, you're going to be dealing with certain hurdles, you know, and that's just the way it is, you know. And now, you know, it's funny, I've come across a lot of people who don't feel, they feel for one reason or not that affirmative action, they say that it's reverse racism, you know, because they're saying now, you know, saying the so-called white or Caucasian is getting the raw end of the stick, you know. But unfortunately for them, they don't really do their homework. The fools who say this, while in theory, you know, and partially they are correct, you know, about the reverse racism, but it's not reverse racism. It's actually, we could say it's totality, you know, saying, it's gone across the board, because the so-called white is being harmed by this, and the so-called black is being harmed by this as well. Okay, the only person that wins in these situations is the American Negro, because they don't give a damn about anything. They don't care about them. They only care about themselves. They don't care about the greater good. Okay, so they're the only ones who win in this situation. All right, them and, you know, the bigots who hold these positions that, you know, people of color are inferior. Now it's really interesting because for a long time, you know, a lot of people really didn't speak up. What's happened now is that we have a high, let's see, you could say it's a higher interaction with Latinos in this country here. And what's happened is that Latino brothers and sisters are really starting to make some noise, you know, and they're taking advantage of a lot of these programs. You know, they figured it out, and they have individuals in their communities that have assimilated the culture of the American Negro as well, you know. But you know, they're really trying to start making some headway, and what you're starting to see, you know, and it's really something, because everything that I'm telling you about, you can actually take a look across the board and see it illustrated. What you have now is this movement, you know, saying, away from, the Latino, you know, to classify Latinos who are upwardly mobile and trying to move forward. They somehow become white Latinos, which is interesting in and of itself, because it's an oxymoron, and it's impossible to be white and a Latino. That is absurd. Okay, you can't be. There's no such thing as a white Latino. Just because you have lighter skin does not make you white. Okay, there are people of color. There are so-called blacks that are light. You know what I'm saying? Extremely light. Red hair, blue eyes. My youngest brother, when he was born, he had fire red hair and blue eyes. Okay, he was not white. Okay, he was not. They're not going to say it's a white African American. How ridiculous does that sound? But that's what we're starting to see here, because there's a struggle here. You know, people are trying to classify them and identify it, and they're having a huge problem. What is done has actually put a glaring light on affirmative action. You know, because you're now in a situation where other people of color are starting to benefit from it, and in particular, people of color who are outnumbering, many of the other so-called races here in this country. You know, so now it's like, oh man, here we go. You can't believe this. You know, affirmative action, it's doing a number on this, that, and the third. But it's always been a problem. Okay, affirmative action hasn't made anything better. Okay, now, you know, a lot of people say, oh, wait a minute. You know, let's talk. You know, Jackie Robinson. You know what I'm saying? Then we'll talk about Jackie Robinson. All right. Now, it's still debatable whether or not he was actually the first quote unquote black person to play in the in Major League Baseball. There were a lot of so-called blacks that actually passed for white that played, you know what I'm saying, in Major League Baseball. I mean, you even had situations where you had members of Congress, and you even had a president who was rumored to be his mother was rumored to be black. You know, and you want to do some research on that, it's very easy to find out who that guy is. You know, and they asked him to denounce dispel the rumor that his mother was a black woman, and he said, "I will not," and he left it alone. You know what I'm saying? And we're told that's early 1900s, so that should give you a little clue as to who it may be. Okay, so you know we're sitting in a situation here, you know, where we'll stick with Jackie Robinson. They're like, Jackie Robinson integrated baseball. Okay, cool. We can roll with that. Jackie Robinson went through a lot of stuff, you know, and there are a lot of so-called, these American Negroes that refer to him as an Uncle Tom, you know, and all this other good crap. But you know, let's just leave them alone for a while. Let's talk a little bit about that. Okay. Now, Jackie Robinson, let's say he integrated baseball, right? Now, so you went from the Negro Leagues, to the major leagues. All right. Now, where are we at now? I'll say conservatively, again, or a rough estimate off the top of my head, I think maybe 11% of professional baseball players are African American. 11%. Okay. When the major leagues, first were saying integrated or whatever, you had the numbers were greater than that. But this is by choice now. Okay. So do you think that affirmative action has helped? In that case, I'd say absolutely not. Absolutely not. Same thing with the, they talk about affirmative action with regards to, let's go with my good buddy, President Barack Obama, right? People like to use the whole affirmative action thing, and he wouldn't have gotten to where he's at without affirmative action. I beg to differ, okay? And this is why. Now, we live in a society that's ever changing and evolving, okay? And like I had mentioned before, this is not the first time that people of color have been highly regarded around the world. And President Barack Obama was not even the first so-called black to lead the quote-unquote free world, okay? Now, not just talking about America here. He may have been the first, one who openly considered himself to be a black man who ran the United States of America. He's a leader of the quote-unquote free world. But before then, the Roman Empire, had black, black African with what was considered heavy Negroidian features, as to correct it, as to quote it directly from a lot of these history books. That were actually, they ruled, man. They sat on the throne in Rome. At one point you had the Senate there that was 2/3 considered themselves to be black, what they call of African descent. It wasn't a really big deal. Okay? So as it is, what's old is new and what's new is old. How they try to say that, it's only a matter of time before things end up, integrating, because people have a tendency, to look beyond the color of your skin, when there's something special about you and there's something that you can really do. You do something that nobody else can do. President Barack Obama, a brilliant man, a genius. I don't, I don't agree with his political philosophies, and that's a whole other separate ball of wax. But if you do some checking up on him, the man was brilliant. Okay, look where he went to school at. Okay, now people can throw all the dirt on him that they want, talk about Barry and all this other good crap, whatever it is, how they like to roll on him. The man is brilliant. There's no taking his education and where he sits at. He's amongst the world's greatest intellects, right? Now, you can't take that from him, okay? So without affirmative action, would he have, been where he's at? I'd say yes. There's a pretty damn good chance he would be, okay? Now, myself, where I'm at, affirmative action has never done anything for me, okay? We talk about, the NAACP and all these so-called civil rights groups, man. And the biggest, faux pas is, they talk about Rosa Parks, okay? You know, she was a big leader, you know, so like, you know, she stood up for black people, and, you know, affirmative action, she's another, you know, reason why affirmative action was put into place, because she demanded fair treatment for blacks. Rosa Parks was not the first person of color, or so-called black, to refuse to give her seat up to a Caucasian person. Okay? She was not. And again, you can look this stuff up. I'm not making it up, and I'm not trying to kick dirt on her, but I will say this, okay? Rosa Parks happened to be a friend and had to be a member of the NAACP. You know what I'm saying? So at the time when they considered them to be, you know, like elitist Negroes, you know. So she happened to be, there were hundreds. They got dragged off buses, beaten in the whole 9 yards. She just happened to know somebody, okay? And that's usually the way it works in the society. Whether you're black, white, purple, green, whatever you are, if you know somebody, things are going to roll your way. You know, you have an opportunity to actually, you know, enact some change. You know, put some things into motion that otherwise would not go into motion. All right. So, you know, you look at that. You know, again, okay, affirmative action, no go. Okay. Now, where I have seen, you know, some guys of affirmative action actually be effective, you could probably say with contracting, right, with the state set-asides. But even with that, you know, that's a very tricky situation, because in order for you to be able to qualify for these certain type of programs, you got to know somebody. You know, New Jersey has got like the worst record for that. You know, Operation Bid Rig and all that. And you know, I'm not going to go into specifics, but I had some experience with that with my father. He was a master plumber, started his own corporation. You know, went hard. You know, knew it, taught at a couple of universities, everything. He was the man, you know, saying, as far as I was concerned, when it came to the plumbing and his business sense of that, right? And he still had to play ball with these people, and it burned him up, you know, because he could not, as a contractor, he should have been able to just go and just say, hey, look, this is what I got here. This is what I can do. This is my body of work. He should have been able to do that just like anybody else, right? But no, he got steered, you know, over into the set-asides. It's like, nah, you know, well, you can start off doing like the little set-aside here. They'll give you a little contract here and a contract there. And, you know, he was not happy about that, because he's like, you know, it's as if, you know, they're you know, discrediting me right out the gate. And he's like, you know, this is right, again, affirmative action. There it goes. You know, it's like this is set aside for the blacks, you know, and the minorities. You know, so what ends up happening, you know, he gets in there, you know, and, you know, he didn't belong in that type of setup. You know, we're lightners, you know, and I'm not gonna, you know, basically, you know, just you know, kick dirt on anybody else. But the bottom line is this: we were all raised with some sort of we have a similar mentality. There are lightners from different parts of this country. And for some odd reason, we all were told the same exact thing. Even though our family split up years ago, we got family that went out to St. Louis. We got families up in Pontiac. We got family up in Toledo. We are all over the place. But all of us were taught the same exact thing. Okay, that we take pride in ourselves, and we are better than whatever is to be put out there. Most importantly, though, we were taught never to take no crap off the American Negro. Okay, and I'm going to show you how this parlays into what we were talking about. Now, so he gets in there, and you know, they got these other minority contractors that are a part of the set-aside program. And man, when I tell you that they are typical, you know what I'm saying, typical American Negro type behavior. Not all of them, but there were quite a few. And what ends up happening is that because they come out of the set-aside program, the other contractors, the GCs, they have no respect for them. Okay, and you know, and being that they fit right in with stereotypical behavior, you know, it's like, you know, they get thrown a little crumb, you know what I'm saying, and like, hey, yeah, here's this, well, I got this here T-bone, I didn't, you know, ate all the meat off of it, you can have this bones. And they're like, oh yeah, oh, thank you, massa, oh, I got the T-bone, yeah. And then what ends up happening, they get the bone, and these morons don't even know how to carve what's left of the meat off the bone, you know, because they just think they did something. You know, a lot of shuck and jive mentality, you know. So my father didn't subscribe to that. He wasn't having it. You know, he wasn't having it. So, you know, get in there, you know, and immediately, you know, it was just a glaring difference, man. Now we were just sitting there just astonished, you know, by, you know, we were a small outfit, but we ran, you know, our business just like the big boys, you know. So, you know, we stood out. You know, we showed up, all our meetings, we were suit and tie. You know, these Negroes, there were other Negroes that were part of this program. They show up in a sweatshirt and some jeans for a business meeting. You know, we get together, we want to bid on a project, we put the bid together, you know, we sit down with the different contractors, we got a prospectus, we got the PowerPoint, we ready, okay? And immediately, the first thing that was said to us, we got pulled aside in one of the meetings like, man, you guys don't like the rest of these guys out here, you know? And it could have been a point for us to be offended, you know? But what we had to do, we looked at it like, you know, this is just an opportunity for us to get to where we need to go, okay? So we stuck with that, you know, and then we started getting invited to bigger and better things, and then, you know, it kind of blew up and took off. We worked on the Marriotts, you know, we built, did a lot of work over at the new Essex County Jail, and it we really took off. You know, made some really good connections, and it was so sad, you know, because we, you know, should have never ever been put in that category that what them set-asides have done. You know what I'm saying? So through an affirmative action type program, we actually had to work about 4 times harder than what we would have if we would just stayed out there on our own. You know? And you know, and then you have to, you know, you deal with these step and fetch it, you know what I'm saying, jive turkey Negroes, you know, who want to try to get a kickback. You know, they got their hand out, you know, like, hey, you know, hey brother, I love that one, you know what I'm saying? I'm sure you didn't heard that too. Hey brother, you know what I'm saying? Hey, man, let me tell you something, man. You know what I'm saying? We people, they come give you the brother man handshake, you know all that. Yo, let me tell you something, man. You know, yo, I can get you this contract over here, you know what I'm saying? You need to slide me something. I said, you slide you something? I said, I'll slide your damn jaw. I can do that. You know what I'm saying? I'll slide your damn jaw and knock your teeth all over the damn place over here. I said, yo, we ain't dealing with that, you know? And that's a big problem. And you know, you wonder how these type of people are allowed to actually thrive in this type of situation. But you know, my dad sat down. He was like, "Hey son," he's like, "let me tell you something." And, you know, I'll never forget. He's like, you know, he's like, these programs here, you know, when they set these type of things up, they put people like this in place to, you know, saying shake us out of the system, you know, because it works real good for them. You know, if they could get us to compromise ourselves, you know, and we slide them some money for a kickback, you know, it's just the start of something that's going to lead us down a dark road, because he said once you go down that road, there's no recovering from it, you know, because then now people ask you to do other things, and you know, should you go and try to tell after you done already got involved in that, and should you, you know, you go and try to tell on somebody, be like, oh no, we got you. Typical American Negro, you know, this black, you know, saying this black so it, you know, he didn't know what he was doing, you know, and just like these other black contractors are not qualified, and you know, they weren't smart enough to catch this, you know. And I took that in. I said, wow, man. I said, wow, okay, I see where that's going. I can understand that, and that's a big problem. That's a really big problem. You know, so in closing, I just say is that I hope you guys enjoyed the first part of basically my introduction into affirmative action and how it you know, saying devalues and has a negative impact on the black community. My second installment, we will go into further depth, you know, saying about how it's actually instrumental in the destruction of the so-called black family. You know, and we can go into that, and it's going to be heavy. And of course, like I said before, you know, I don't expect everybody to agree with me. You know, if you want to chime in, you got something you'd like to say, I definitely want to hear from you. You know, let's be clear, but don't come at me with no ignorance. You know, because I'll put you down. You know, like a lame dog, I will put you down. You know, there'll be nothing left of you. Okay. You want to, you know, come at me with some facts, you know, or statistics, or you know, you want to respond in a way that I find productive, or you know, I'm not akin to, you know, basically pretending like I know everything. You know, I always learn something, and a lot of you, had you seen my the last video that I did with my brother Richard Fluid Duh. You know what I'm saying? Or Duh, you know what I'm saying? You see that? I learned something, you know, about the pressures that so-called black women are facing. You know, I learned a lot from that. You know, and it's just it's something where we're always learning. You know, I'll be 37 this year, and I'm always learning. There's always something I can learn. I take everything in like a sponge. You know, I take it in like a sponge, and I don't mind. So like I said, you got something, you know, positive you want to say, you know, that's fine with me. One thing I won't tolerate, you know, is stupidity and ignorance. In particular, you know, NAACP. Let me send this message to you individuals right now. I've been proven right time and time again, you know, about how you all are a huge problem. You know, not just for so-called blacks, but also for so-called whites. You're greedy, self-serving, you know, and everything revolves around you. You know, you sell out the so-called community for $1. Okay, when you guys did this whole little thing with the Clippers mess that just went down, you know, you clowns are nowhere to be seen. You know, you have the guy out there in California, he takes the heat, you have him resign, but his pockets have already been lined with millions of so-called black dollars that were supposed to be going to help the so-called black community. Okay, but there's only one group, and I see you jokers from a mile away, you know. So, hey, you guys want to get with me? No problem. I'll debate you anytime, any place, anywhere, any form. You set it up, I will be there. You know, and as long as we can remain respectful towards one another, you know, I'll hear you out. Okay, but other than that, you know, it's a done deal. You know, it's a done deal, and it's a wrap. You know, because you know, I never ever come out of my face and make a statement that I can't back up. You know, those who've known me for years, you know how I do. You know, I learned the hard way as a young buck. You know, my mother and father would constantly put the heat on me. You know, and if I say something, they'd be like, well, prove it. You know, and they give me a couple of days, and I'm in there, got my encyclopedias, you know what I'm saying, you know, because yeah, the internet wasn't around back then when I was a little guy, you know what I'm saying, it was nothing but like the bulletin boards for chat room type thing, so everything was in the books, you know, so that's how I learned how to be able to hold my own. Okay, so even when individuals come up with they quote statistics and they pull, you know, these sites from non-credible sources, I'll take you apart. You know, I'll take you apart. That's just a part of being a good student and a diligent fan of education. All right. So in closing, let me say that I hope you all have enjoyed this, and you know, let's go. Look forward to the next part 2. Be blessed.